That's all we need.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, as always, Alex, and with me I have Logan. How are you, Logan?
Doing well, thanks, Alex. Good to be here.
Yeah, good to be here. It's a shame it's not under slightly better circumstances with a win against Huddersfield, but we've sort of come to expect these things with City this season. It was a 2-0 defeat to Huddersfield on the weekend, which we will discuss for the episode. And then we've also got the massive game against Peterborough tomorrow morning to look forward to before we discuss the Luton game on the weekend. I guess starting with the Huddersfield game, I guess biggest surprise or biggest lack of surprise, I guess, around the change of formation back to the 4-3-3. How did you feel when you saw the formation and the lineup announced before the game?
Yeah, look, I answer this one hesitantly, only because, we, as fans, we've become, probably uber critical and think that, we know everything there is to know about football. And I guess that, coming at it from a standpoint, whereas I don't pretend that, I know more than Grant McCann or any of the City coaching staff about what is the right formation and what the game plan specifically was that they had to take on Huddersfield. But I mean, from a fan's perspective, we only have to look at 2 weeks prior before the international break week and look at the way we played against Middlesbrough. And it was, by all accounts, it was the most free-flowing and, I guess, correct way we've seen City play it. They seemed to really suit the formation. The players looked comfortable. And we obviously ended up getting a very, very crucial 3 points. So I know we're away from home and all the rest of it, but to change the formation and to, I guess, then be making some pretty interesting comments about how it's a private matter straight after, it doesn't really do anything to galvanise the City faithful, particularly in the manner that we went on and lost the game 2-0. So, yeah, look, leaves a lot to the imagination, that's for sure. And, I think the result, we kind of got what we deserved.
Yeah, the title of this episode is The Private Matters of Undone City, and it seems to be the case. I guess the biggest frustration, and I completely accept the point as well that, we aren't football managers and that there's probably a lot more to it than a simple, we'll go with this formation. That's, they've probably looked at the Huddersfield team and they've probably made that call. But I can't help but look at, I think it was Deschamps Bernard made comments during the week that he thought the 3-5-2 formation suited them really well. It gave them a bit more security down back. The players seemed to buy into it. It got us the result. Even looking outside of the formation, the fact that Emmanuel went out of the side for Coyle when Emmanuel had quite a good game, I thought. It was just, it was very confusing to see the reversion to the 4-3-3. And I think Dan and I spoke last week before the international break, just after the international break, about how it was actually a positive that we'd had the international break. It might have given the players a bit more time to get to know the alternate formation, to play around with the 3-5-2 a bit more and see how it would fit in with the players. So it was just a bit confusing to just go straight back to the 4-3-3. And I think even the Huddersfield manager commented after the game saying, he was a bit surprised at the way we lined up because it seemed as if the 3-5-2 had worked much better for us. Maybe they were trying to surprise him by going back to the 4-3-3. I don't know. But, regardless, it was a bit of a disappointing performance in the end, considering the way we played against Middlesbrough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was kind of spearheaded by the first goal that we conceded, I think only 9 minutes in, an incredibly sloppy goal to concede. And I mean, there's always an argument where if you're going to concede a goal, it's probably best to concede early and then play your way back into the match as opposed to, suffering a last minute defeat. But I kind of got the feeling that the moment Huddersfield got that early breakthrough, and particularly the fashion that it came in, you always knew that we're going to be chasing our tails. And even though there were some really open passages and arguably we could have found ourselves, level many times, the game was kind of there to be had. It left that real bitter taste in your mouth, didn't it? That we conceded so softly after exactly what, you and Dan were speaking about. The fact that we'd had a great result against Middlesbrough, you had the break week and the international break, and thought that if anything, that's as good as time as ever to kind of get the cogs ticking over again and build a bit of momentum. But just never was to be.
Yeah, 9 goals conceded from set pieces. I think the next worst in the league is 6 conceded. I think Huddersfield have scored the most from set pieces as well, so it sort of seemed to stand to reason that they were going to score a set piece against us. Yeah, I'm in a bit of two minds about the goal itself. I felt like Ingram could have done a lot better with the clearance, with the punch, but it also felt like there was, a whole lot of players falling over at the back post there, and whether there's a foul to be picked out either way potentially. It just seemed sort of an interesting decision just to let things run, and of course ended up with them scrambling the ball across the line. And as you said, I mean, it did feel like after that point it was really difficult to see us getting back into the game. And they did get that second, not arguably, but certainly fantastic goal to seal the game in the second half. But by then it was far too late for us. I mean, I'm struggling to sort of think of any clear moments of danger or chances that were created in the game. I think Honeyman at one point, he played Coyle in, or he played someone in with a really great ball through into the box, kind of cutting behind the defense, which was great to see. I thought Elder was reasonably good and challenging on the left-hand side, but not many big moments stood out for me in our performance.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be ticking, certainly in the midfield. Like our general control of play doesn't seem to be there. And even when we do get, I dare say, good attacking opportunities, we're finding them really hard to come by. Like the actual creating of the chances it seems to be, not as fluent. I know that we've obviously taken the step up from League One, but just when we do have the ball, there doesn't seem to be enough respect of possession. And then when we do lose it, we seem to just be, scoundreling, trying to jump over each other, and we look very disorganized. And I guess we're kind of the question that I just keep coming back to is, when we fall behind in a game, you wonder who's going to kind of pop up and score. Like we do have this real sense of concern in the team at the moment that we're finding goals hard to come by, and it seems like when we do score them, there's a very good chance that we'll get a second or a third. But there's so many times where the game starts and you kind of just have that feeling that, are we even going to put one in these 90 minutes, because we seem to be playing very negative football. I think that's the biggest problem that we can see at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something to be concerned about. I mean, I think Smith hasn't managed to score a goal yet, which is probably starting to become a bit of a concern, even just from his point of view of his confidence taking a bit of a hit with that. Lewis Potter, Wilkes sort of struggling for goals as well after being so prolific last season. And one of the big casualties of the 3-5-2 was probably Eves, who I thought was arguably deserving of another start. I think he's had a couple of good games now in a row, and then it's about building that momentum for him. And by switching to that 3-5-2, you basically remove that ability for him to start the game and that position for him to play in. So it's an interesting one. I mean, Doherty came out of the side as well, so we had Cannon, Honeyman, and Smallwood in the midfield. I thought Honeyman had a fantastic game, or I thought he had a positive game. I think that was one of the real silver linings of the display. But yeah, really struggling for positives out of it.
Yeah, and I know it's kind of rocks and diamonds with the way Smallwood seems to play, but I still cannot work out how he's still holding on to the captain's armband and starting week in, week out, because he looks extremely careless at times and frustrated. But there's everything about Richie Smallwood at the moment seems to kind of symbolize the way that we play. He seems to lose possession quite frequently. And I don't know if I want to necessarily put the blame on him. I think it's probably a more widespread issue than just him. But there are players like him, as you mentioned, that aren't really, what you would consider pulling their weight, so to speak. And then there's players like Emmanuel and, as you said, Eves, who are incredibly hungry. And when it's not working, and you can see the position we find ourselves in, then by all means, then I feel like we have to try and impress. Like, what else is there in the current squad? Who's not getting game time, and other opportunities for them to prove themselves? And like you said, I mean, against Middlesbrough, we saw that Eves and Emmanuel, were two players that really put their hand up. And then to find themselves out of the squad, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it?
Yeah, it reminds me. Well, it doesn't remind me, but it makes me cast my mind back to last season when we went through that sticky patch in December, and we did change the side. We pulled Emmanuel out and put Coyle in, as an example of it going the other way, and we went on a winning run, and we actually kept the same team, and we kept consistency in the side, and we kept winning games. And it's just bizarre to me that we've sort of similarly changed things up last game against Middlesbrough, got a positive result, and then gone, oh, well, actually, hang on, let's just revert back to what we were doing before that wasn't working. It just makes me scratch my head quite a bit in terms of what the coaching staff sees or what they're thinking to do that. And it's going to make tomorrow morning's game really fascinating to see what we do, because I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the side to go back to the 3-5-2.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's almost a double negative in some ways, because if McCann doesn't stick with the 3-5-2 and he plays the same formation and we don't get a result, well, obviously that's going to put a huge gap between him and the fans, which is probably at a time where he can't afford it. And then if he does, play with or change the system and we lose, then he's in some ways proven right. So it's such an interesting time, which made that comment, particularly about the being a private issue, even all the more concerning.
Yeah, and we'll talk a bit more about McGann in a little bit, but we'll first get your 3-1 votes for this game, if you were able to find 3 players to pull out and give a bit of praise to, and then we'll talk a bit more about McCann.
Yeah, look, I would have to side with you. I think you kind of touched on it before, that I feel like we're a better side when Honeyman's in it, and I thought that some of the build-up play that he was producing, he just gave me this sense of, if anybody's going to be a spark, it's him. I'm continually impressed by Cannon. I think that if he gets a little bit more time and really starts to kind of build in confidence and get used to the players around him, I think he's going to be quite the find. So I gave my 3 points to Honeyman. I gave 2 points to Cannon and 1 point to Callum Elder. That was kind of what I thought. I actually thought Ingram didn't have a bad game, except for the punch that that was mistimed or interfered with, depending on what side of the fence you sit. But yeah, that's probably how I would have gone.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was also thinking about Ingram, and then I just couldn't give him a vote for the way that goal was conceded. So he just missed out for me. But yeah, I was impressed with Elder's game. I actually gave him the 3 votes. I thought he was particularly solid on the left-hand side. He's one of those players who he goes under the radar so much with the chances he creates and the ability to shut down the opposition as well. But considering we're not scoring goals at the moment, it makes it really tough to see those chances converted, or to see those crosses or corners and opportunities, those throw-ins really capitalized on. So look, he probably stood out for me. But then, as you said,
and probably even worth noting as well, is he was away in Japan on international duty as well during the week. So to do that travel, I know that's expected of international footballers, but fair play to him as well. That makes the performance even better, if you will.
Yeah, and if anyone's going to have an excuse for a poor performance, it's him. So considering the level of his performance, it makes you question what the others were doing over the break. And I gave Honeyman my 2 votes as well. I thought he was really tidy. I thought he had a few really good passages of play and passing ability, and seemed to be always on the front foot and trying to create something for us, which was great to see. And it's something that we've really lacked in his absence. So it was good to see him back in the side. And it does make that question about Smallwood's place in the side quite an interesting one, because I'd really hope or expect to see tomorrow morning potentially Doherty coming back into the side for Smallwood and giving us a bit more mobility in that midfield, but or Smith potentially coming in as well. Would be interesting to see. And then I've given the 1 vote to Greaves. I thought Greaves had a few chances in that second half where he had a couple of headers on goal where he really could have got one in the back of the net and pulled us back into the game. So I thought he had a pretty dangerous game for us as well. And he's having a reasonably good season, but I guess because we saw it last season as well, it's just sort of come to be expected. But it's good to see him take that step up to the next level and a higher division, and not necessarily look out of place. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say that he's been one of the reasons for us conceding goals. Maybe it's more about the system, but it is a funny one. It sort of reminds me of the season that we got relegated from the Premier League, where you look at that back four and you think it's not a bad back four, and yet we're conceding so many goals. And I just can't understand how it happens. So whether it's the system, whether it's confidence, whether it's communication, I don't know what it is, because the individual players, when you look at them, you look at Coyle, you look at Elder, you look at Greaves, you look at Jones or Bernard, they're all really solid players. And I can't really fault any of them on their seasons so far. And yet we're sort of conceding poor goals. It's a tough one.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to what we are talking about before with just there doesn't seem to be any real synergy between the way that we set up in our shape with the midfield and the defence. I think that we largely see our back four or three scrambling and kind of chasing the ball or getting, we've got situations where we're getting beaten on set piece when you've got an attacking player like Malik Wilkes back, missing headers and losing his man in a contest. So, it leaves a lot to the imagination. And I really do hope that we can sort it out sooner rather than later, because set pieces are a huge issue at the moment.
Yeah, certainly. Well, look, that's probably a good opportunity to talk about or focus in on Grant McCann, which is a really interesting one, because I think it was the second or third episode of this season I was sort of talking about him being able to carve out a legacy at City, because he was, he had such a strong win percentage after that season in League One. He'd been here for, this is what, his third season now. Was really starting, after that 4-1 win at Preston, you think, oh, okay, if he can start to get going in the Championship, then he could actually turn things around with the supporters, win them back over. And now we find ourselves here only 10, 11 games later, where we're back to the same sort of issues at press conferences, where he gets asked a question and he gets very kind of locked down and confrontational with reporters, sort of saying it's a private matter with his coaching staff, which is hugely condescending, I've got to say, to the 200 or so, or 2,000 or so City supporters who travelled to Huddersfield to watch us lose 2-0, to not even deign to give them any sort of explanation. Or it's not necessarily a question that's saying, oh, it's your fault that we lost necessarily. It's just saying, what was the reasoning or what was the thought process behind switching to the 4-3-3? And he could have just said, it was just a tactical decision. It was based on the way Huddersfield set up. It was, the players we had available, anything like that. But to just say, oh, it's a private matter was very combative, and I guess worrying signs if it's it's a bit reminiscent of that second half of the season when we were relegated 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, it's a very headstrong approach, and I totally agree with you. I think that the people who probably deserve the biggest explanation were the people who travelled to Huddersfield and watched that performance. And obviously it wasn't flattering on the eye, but equally, if McCann wins that game and then in the press conference, the question is, hey, Grant, you reverted back from a winning formation. What was the thinking? I'm sure that he would offer that information very readily. And so I think that that's probably the biggest issue that we have here, is it feels like it's a lack of transparency. And it's more the fact that we want to know the insight. Like, fans are hungry for the thinking behind the team. We ride the players, successes. We give it to them when they're not succeeding. And at the same time, where there's people investing their hard-earned money to get alongside and buy merch and support the team, I do think that there's huge merit with giving a closer insight to the fans than saying it's a private matter. I thought that was a confusing one, and it just reminded me straight away of the KLP contract situation.
Yeah,
12 or 13 months earlier, where it was the same kind of dialogue, and you're just sort of scratching your head going, I don't see the merit. I'm not sure what he's trying to achieve.
Yeah. Do you think potentially, well, I mean, it's always hard to say, I suppose, with, the rumors around the potential takeover, things like that, as well as the poor run of form. Do you think it's potentially just the pressure getting to him, where it's that realization that if, for example, if the takeover goes through, you'd have to expect that he won't have a future at City going forward. And if the takeover doesn't even go through, if this season does end in a relegation, where that sort of leaves him and his sort of ambitions as a manager, there must be a lot of pressure on him and a lot of things for him to sort of weigh up in terms of how the season's starting to pan out.
Absolutely. I think I can't imagine any job on this earth where that level of speculation is a comfortable place to work. And that's probably makes the response even more concerning, because it is a really good opportunity to kind of endear yourself to the fans. I think if you actually had gone to the press conference, said, you know what, in theory I got it wrong, then a lot of people would be really buoyed and optimistic about the game against the Posh in the morning, because you would be sitting there going, we know what formations are gonna be come to fruition. We won last time we played this formation, and it gives the fans a real hope and sense of joy about the game that they're about to watch. But instead, because he chose that path, if anything, now the daggers are out, and everybody will be waiting for that, the team lineup to come out at 5:30.
I suspect we won't be surprised by the formation in the morning, but I guess we'll see what happens with that. Do you sort of see any way back for him now with the supporters, or do you think the bridges are burned and the support? It's almost like a fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me situation, where I think the supporters, were scorned by him in that championship relegation season, gave him that second chance after the League One promotion, and are now probably feeling a bit, chances have run out for Grant.
It's amazing what 3 points can do. I probably wouldn't go that far. I totally agree, and I can see that. You can see it on social media. You can see it when you chat to City fans, that the feeling amongst it is that Grant McCann is skating on thin ice. But everybody knows that wins can change that mentality very quickly. And look, I think at this point in time, it's what everybody wants. I mean, a few 3-point outings, and all of a sudden, we find ourselves back in the middle of the championship table. I think that people will be very quick to forgive. I guess the sad reality is that as we sit down after 10, 11 games, it would be a very surprising thing to see that with what we've been watching over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. And look, it is a good point. I mean, I was sitting here last week after the victory in the 3-5-2 formation thinking, oh, okay, well, he's showing a bit of creativity, flexibility, willing to change, see where that leaves us. And a week later, sort of attitudes change. So I do take the point that a loss or a win can change the attitude very quickly. Well, we'll move on then. We'll go through our triple flashback feature of the week, and then we'll go on and look ahead to the 2 games that we have in store. But we'll start with our quiz question for the week. And I think last time you were pretty quick off the mark with a few of the answers. So this one's potentially a little bit tough. It might not be too tough for you, but see how you go. The question is, can you name the last 3 players to finish leading goal scorer? So there will be some players who might have finished top goal scorer for a number of seasons, but I'm after the last 3 players.
Oh, the last 3 players. Okay. And we are talking here City Golden Boot. We're not talking across the leagues, are we?
No, just City. Yeah, just City leading scorers.
Okay, so I think the obvious one that stands out for me is I think Abel Hernandez has to be up there. He has to be in the 3, because I don't remember watching a striker as prolific as him over the last decade for City. So he would probably be one. But the only reason that I'm concerned about saying that is because I know that last season, we had, and I'm not even sure who ended up winning. I think it was Malik Wilkes got the most goals for us. But I do know that Magennis came home quite strongly, and Keane Lewis-Potter wasn't too far off either. So I would probably lock in Wilkes. I would lock in Hernandez. And outside of that, it would have to be obviously Jared Bowen. And then that gives me another headache, is wondering if – I don't think Grzycki was ever that prolific. I know that he had a lot to do with goals, but I don't think he ever – actually, no, I can definitely rule him out. I'm going to lock in Wilkes, Hernandez, and Bowen.
So you've got 2 out of 3 there. You were right that Wilkes got it last season, which was good.
Yep.
And Bowen has been our leading goal scorer 3 seasons in a row, which it was pretty incredible. So the 17-18, 18-19, and 19-20 seasons with 14, 22, 16.
I'm going to kick myself in the front of this.
The third one was actually Snodgrass in the Premier League season when he scored 7 goals. So Hernandez was the leading goal scorer the season before that, but it was actually Snodgrass in that 16-17 season. He scored 7 goals for us, which is a pretty low top goal scorer amount. Wilkes got 19 last season as well. So pretty close to that one. I mean, the interesting one there is, of course, because Bowen was leading goal scorer for 3 seasons in a row, it sort of takes you back a little way to where it was. And, I mean, Hernandez is a really good shout, because that was, obviously that was the season before that, and it was quite prolific for us as well. And I'm trying to think that that 16-17 season, he must have been just injured for a fair chunk of it, because he scored the 2 goals against Bournemouth under Silva. But I mean, I guess we had Nias as well.
Abel Hernandez was out for a long time, because I think part of him returning maybe in that Bournemouth game, and I think that was around that's January. It was
it would have had to be January or late December maybe.
Yeah,
Oh
so
no, yeah, probably would have been January.
Yeah, so you're probably right. I think he did see a fair bit of time on the sidelines that season. But I just, as I said, I have such fond memories of watching Abel Hernandez score for City, and he seemed like the most prolific scorer that we've had. But then I guess I'm discrediting Bowen because I guess I forget how frequently he found the back of the net as well.
Yeah, I think it must have been 6 or 7 years ago the other day, our 2-2 draw with Arsenal, where Hernandez got that goal at the end of the movement, where it was basically kickoff in the second half, and we just passed it around. Arsenal didn't touch the ball, and it ended with Huddersfield, I think, crossing for Hernandez to head into the back of the net to put us up 2-1. So, yeah, good memory. Yeah, it was weird that first season with Hernandez. He scored so many headers, and then I don't think he got another header for us after that season, which is a bit funny. But anyway, let's look ahead now to the Peterborough game that we have tomorrow morning, bright and early at, I think, 5:45 in the morning, which is slightly better than the 4:45s that we've been used to recently. Familiar to us from last season in League One, coming up with us as automatic promotion in second place. They've only got one win in their last 5, which was against Birmingham, but they did have a 0-0 draw with Bournemouth, which is a reasonably impressive result given Bournemouth's form. And we've only won 2 of our last 5 games against them. So we won 3-1 in the most recent game last season to see them off. I guess the biggest thing for them as well is that their form away from home has been horrendous. I don't think they've got a single win. They might not even have a single draw away from home this season. So it's as good an opportunity as any, if we're going to take it, to get 3 points on the board against them. But how do you feel about it going into it?
Well, I felt better about it until you just read that stat and talked about how horrible their away form is, because it's got all the makings for a strong 2-3-0 Peterborough victory now. No, look, I think this is one of the games that City will approach with confidence. I think that they actually took a lot of, I know that this is kind of a bit counterintuitive because the result at Huddersfield was a disappointing one. And I know that there's been the international break week, but I think that result against Middlesbrough was a very big shot in the arm for the confidence. And I think getting back to the KCOM, or whatever it's called these days, the MKM.
MKM, yeah.
MKM stadium. Getting back on home turf, I think is going to be a crucial thing. I think that it probably does have the makings for, I dare say, McCann to revert to the 3-5-2 system. And I think that
fingers crossed.
And just given the fact that, they're a fellow League One promoted team, I think that mentally that does a lot for the confidence. And I think you'll see a very attacking City in the morning. I don't think that they're going to be able to continue to play, this really loose and open, whatever you can call what they're playing at the moment. I think that there's going to be a lot more impetus, and they're going to be very, very keen to get 3 points here. And it is going to be such a crucial 3 points. I think when we talk about the pressure that's currently being heaped on Grant McCann, 3 points in the morning goes a long way. But if we lose this game, it is going to be very much a pitchfork brigade. And I think McCann will find himself in a real spot of trouble.
Yeah, I just keep thinking about, because I think it's Barnsley who are below us on the table, and the fact that their manager is also under severe pressure and likely to be sacked soon. And I think Cardiff's in a similar position, maybe a place or two above us in the table. And I look at those clubs and just the small amount of ambition or sort of courage that they're showing in saying, let's try and make a change. You look at Nottingham Forest bringing in Steve Cooper and how they've charged up the table. I look back at when we had Leonard Slutsky in charge, Nigel Adkins wasn't really sacked, but he sort of left after a spell. We sacked Slutsky when we weren't getting results and tried to change things around. And Adkins came in and tightened us up, and we kind of ended up finishing mid-table that season. It just baffles me that there's been this sort of change in mentality where Grant is sort of excused of any sort of poor form, poor results, anything, was able to take us down and bring us back up, granted. But you would now sort of think that in any other club, a loss to Peterborough would see the manager under severe pressure, but I just can't see any sort of a pressure or action taken against McCann if there was to be a defeat, which just seems sort of disappointing. I mean, I can't imagine how the players would sort of think about it, where it just shows kind of a lack of ambition from the owners.
Yeah, I believe that's probably a good point, but I think given the uncertainty around what's happening with the club sale and the very clear lack of investment or willingness to invest from the management, it's more of a concept of who would they go and get, who is available, that is going to be a level up from Grant McCann. I just don't know if there's that many managers out there. I mean, my hope and what I'm crossing my fingers and toes for is that the time to run perfectly and it coincides with Steve Bruce's sacking from Newcastle.
Yeah. We were talking about that last week, actually. It was, stars are sort of lining up for that to happen, I would think. Bruce leaves Newcastle, new owners come in here, reunion at Hull, takes us back up next season. Oh, it's all sort of written in the stars, but
it would be very romantic.
It would. So no, it will be interesting. What are your senses of any potential changes to the lineup for this side? We sort of already talked about Smallwood potentially going out of the side. Would you see a change up top? Would you put Eves in over Smith, something like that, or how do you see it?
I don't think you're going to see Tom Eves start. I think that maybe Tom Eves might have a strong role. He may get a turn kind of earlier in the second half. You might see him come on about the 50th minute or so, depending on obviously game script, what's actually happening. I think there's a very
strong
Magennis. Absolutely. I do think that there's a very, very strong case for Josh Emanuel to start, though, particularly if we do play the 3-5-2 that we're hoping and potentially expecting. I definitely see Emanuel finding a way into that lineup tomorrow. But I'd be very surprised if when the team sheet gets announced, Tom Eves is ready to go for the full 90.
And I think Tom Huddleston should be fit now as well. So I wonder if he's another option that we might look at in that midfield.
Yeah, I think Tom Huddleston is close, and I think that if that were the case, if Tom Huddleston's close, same kind of deal. I'd be surprised to see him start unless he kind of played the first half. But you just looking at how disorganised we seem to be, we're just crying out for Huddleston to get back, get fit, and really take some control and ownership of that middle part of the park, because we need that direction, and we know that his long passing game can bring.
Yeah, it's no coincidence that we've kept 2 clean sheets in the 2 games he started. I think his ability to control that midfield is very valuable. How are you feeling in terms of a result? Are you confident that we can get the 3 points? Do you think it might be a case of another draw like against Blackpool, or how are you feeling?
I think it's going to be a very similar game to Middlesbrough. I get the feeling that we'll kind of chip away, and I think you'll see us weather a bit of a storm, and I think there'll be a real ebb and flow to the game. But then I think late on, we'll probably get a breakthrough. And I think once we get that breakthrough, I would likely to see a second and potentially third goal. Yeah. Assuming we can keep things tight at the back, I've got a very good feeling about this. And I think it's a game that City have to win, and nobody knows that more than them.
Yeah, no, certainly. Big game, big game. We also faced Luton Town this weekend, who we have a reasonable record against. I think we've won 3 of our last 5 against them. I think the most recent win was back in September of that relegation year, where Kevin Stewart might have scored that. I think he might have got 2 goals in the game from memory. He scored one that sort of bundled across the line anyway. I guess the interesting element of this game is the reunion with Reece Burke, who I sort of noticed hasn't been starting for Luton recently. I think he's been sat on the bench, so not injured, just not really in the side. But Luton Town traveling pretty well. I think they've got 2 wins in their last 5. They had a draw with Derby this morning. I think they were losing 2-1 and got a pretty late goal in that one. But I mean, I guess Derby's been having a pretty decent season in the end after expectations of a pretty poor one. But Luton traveling reasonably well. It's going to be a tough game in that one as well. Seems to be, I sort of put them in the same bracket as maybe a Millwall or a Reading or someone like that, who it's a tough game, but it's certainly a game that we shouldn't be too overawed by.
Absolutely. And I mean, we talk about, turning it rounds. I think that this is a 2-game patch, the better than ever for us to kind of be able to fix it. If you get 6 points in the next kind of 3 days, things look very different. And all of a sudden the picture for McCann and all of the kind of hypotheticals that we've been talking about somewhat get thrown out the window. Also, probably worth highlighting as well is Luton Town is a return for George Moncur as well,
Of
back
course,
to
yeah.
his old hunting ground. But I actually do have very fond memories from that the 3-0 victory at Luton Town. I thought that was just one of those really odd games. And as you said, that Stewart goal is kind of hard to forget just because of the manner that it happened in. So yeah, I think we can be very optimistic about this game. And yeah, look, that's 6 points. I know that even just saying it out loud, the thought of it, does fill us with a lot of hope. And what a fantastic time it would be to, get on the podcast next week and be talking about City clawing their way back up into the middle of the table.
Yeah, look, and it's a good shout on Moncur. I mean, he's sort of a forgotten man in a sense. Didn't get on the pitch, I don't think, against Huddersfield. So it would be interesting to see if it's sort of that strategy of letting him start the game and really show that he's got a point to prove against them could really work in our favor. Yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be an interesting 2 games. I think there's a lot that can come out of it. I think this is sort of our sliding doors moment because, as you say, we got the draw against Blackpool and the win against Borough and then the loss against Huddersfield. If we get 3 or 4 points or 6 points out of these next 2 games, suddenly that Huddersfield game is just a blip, and it's actually a pretty it's a strong run of form. But if it's a loss or 2 losses, then suddenly it's we're right back in the doldrums, and it'd be really tough to sort of climb out of, considering the losses are coming against Peterborough, who are right below us in the table.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's the greatest picture that you've painted is knowing that the teams that we're playing are absolutely teams that we have to be winning against. We're not asking for the big trip to knocking off the relegated Premier League teams or anything like that. It's definitely the teams that we expect to be dealing with come the middle of next year when we're trying to hopefully avoid demotion back to League One.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be a big game starting with tomorrow morning against Peterborough, which we'll be getting up for and looking forward to. So I'll sort of head off now so I can get a bit of sleep before the game. It's only 10 hours away or something. My maths is horrible. Yeah, 10 hours away. So it'll be a lot of fun to look forward to. So thanks for joining me for this episode, Logan.
No worries, Alex. And one question for you before you go. We're so used to players coming and returning to Hull and scoring the winners for their clubs. Can it happen at Luton Town on Saturday? Can George Moncur be that man and get his first goal for the club and capture a famous 3 points?
Yeah, well, hopefully it's him and it's not Burke who's scoring the goal. Returning against his former club. Yeah, hopefully it's Moncur getting the winner for us would be fantastic. So we've got a lot to look forward to this week, and we'll be back next week to cover all the action. But until then, come on, City.